We zoned in here.
We are zoned in. We are here talking NBA. I'm Sean Deveney with Heavy.com Sports. This is Steve Bulpett, our NBA insider. And we've got some things to discuss here as the season is ready to wrap up. First thing I want to hit is probably one of the more disappointing topics of the season, and that's the Lakers not going to be even in the play-in tournament. Just a really discouraging ending for that team. I guess just if you take the big picture and say, what went wrong here, Steve?
Outside of everything, I don't have an answer for you. Everything that could go wrong kind of did. About. I mean, LeBron was still putting up numbers, so that didn't go wrong. But maybe that was part of what went wrong, is that he felt like he had to carry them, and they never really, because of that, there was a lot of let's watch LeBron do this, and they never really developed the kind of basketball chemistry that they were going to need. LeBron could take them so far. He certainly is a colossus, but it wasn't getting it done in the larger sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. Frank Vogel was talking about this in an interview that he did with The Athletic, that if you go back to the preseason, they were 0-6. And they were getting their heads handed to them in that preseason, and there's a tendency to say with the exhibition games that they don't matter, and to an extent that's true. But if your team looks that bad at that point, it's hard to see where the improvement was going to come from. That seemed to be they just got off on that foot and just never really seemed to recover.
Yeah, I think there was a sense of we'll figure it out. Don't worry, we'll get it. Don't worry about a thing. We'll get it worked out. And I was there too with that. And I figured if they were healthy, and that we'll still never know what they would have looked like with reasonable health.
Yeah.
With Davis and LeBron on the floor together. But then again, their numbers weren't great either. They were, that wasn't a world beater team. There's still a question to me about how things might have worked out. But the thing is that they never put in the work as a group to make it work out. And I think that's the real disappointing part. Anyone who comes into a team, you bring your individual skill set, you bring your approach to the game, all those things. But then you have to tailor what you can do to the needs of that particular team in that particular season. You can bring back the same 15-man roster from 1 year to the next, but it's still a different team. So you have to figure out how you're going to make that group work.
I guess the big thing for me, though, is that when you look at what's next for the Lakers, LeBron at age 37, if you look at his first 15 years in the NBA, he missed an average of 4.7 games per season. In the last 4 years with the Lakers, 20.3 games per season. Yeah. Now, that age is catching up to him. I think that's pretty clear that they can't go into next season saying, well, we'll get 82 games out of LeBron. I don't think you're going to.
No, I don't. But I don't think anyone, any player over 25 that they bank on 82 really, But I think the bigger issue is what's around him, and does it fit? I mean, if you look at the Celtics in the offseason when Brad Stevens took over, he said his goal was to get people that worked well with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The Lakers, their offseason, they went and got guys that had really nice resumes, but did they get guys that could work with a LeBron and an Anthony Davis? Russell Westbrook, ridiculously fine resume, but as a ball-dominant guy, does he work with LeBron James? And if not, I mean, clearly, we're going to put a lot of this on Russell Westbrook, but clearly LeBron had to give something too here. instead of the ball being in his hands a lot, he had to be the one to make cuts. Come on, as the Celtics were telling, Jason Tatum, make a cut and get the ball, get free and get the ball in a position to finish. I think that, LeBron had to give something in that regard as well. And it just never really happened. And when guys got into a rut there and they never figured it out, they never got out of it.
Yeah, that seemed to be the real issue. I think the other thing, though, is that the way that last offseason went probably exposed some real flaws in the organization, and I just wonder if that's something that they're going to address. Or if they're going to say, this is how we've done things in the past, we're going to stick with it. You have Linda Rambis, who's very close with Jeannie Buss, and of course Kurt Rambis. That they're sort of a level that I think when you look at Magic Johnson, when there was the big blow up in 2019 and he left the organization, a lot of people made that into Rob Pelinka versus Magic Johnson. It wasn't just that, though. It was also this Rambis layer, and of course you also had Jim Buss with the organization. So it's been a very confused situation at the top. I think people in the organization don't necessarily know, where the shots are going to be called and what they're going to be. And, I think there's a little bit of an issue there that I wonder if they're going to address that in the offseason.
Yeah. The Lakers, in their most successful times, there was a delineation. There was basketball operations and there were the other operations.
Right.
And I think people are getting a little bit skewed view if they're watching the new HBO series about the 80s Lakers. But the basketball people kind of ran basketball. And right, what seems to be happening now is that there's a lot of hands involved. And you can't make basketball decisions based on other stuff. And you've got, looking at the hands there, the Rambises, there's, Jeannie Buss, there's Rob Pelinka, and then there's LeBron and Clutch Sports.
Right.
There's a lot of hands in there trying to, people saying, the hell with the future, let's do now. And, for chasing something that may or may not be there, do you want to screw up your franchise for the next 10 years? Maybe that's pushing it a bit too far, but you're kind of handcuffed now.
Yeah.
Because you look at what Russell Westbrook has for a player option, $47 million.
Safe to say he'll opt in.
Hey, look, 10 million here, 10 million there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money, right?
Yeah, right.
And so they're in kind of quicksand right now, or to keep it an LA analogy, they're in the La Brea tar pits right now. And how do they get out? And does digging deeper by giving away future first rounders, is that what are the chances that gets you out? That let's dig further and see if we get out.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is they only have two that they could possibly offer, and that's 2027, which they didn't want to offer at the trade deadline. But that was for a swap that would have gotten you John Wall. You'd have got rid of Russell Westbrook and brought in another problem, another headache in John Wall, where you don't know how he's going to play and all that. But you're right. I mean, it's a good way to put it that you're in a hole. Do you try to dig yourself out by packaging those two picks with Russell Westbrook and trying to get yourself out of that situation that way? If you can get something back, if you can get back a useful player, if you can undo some of the damage that's done, some versatile guys who can play both offense and defense might be a good idea. That was one of the big issues with them. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult decision because you are mortgaging the future for like I say, a guy who's 37 years old, and Anthony Davis hasn't been able to stay healthy. So, you're really putting yourself in a tough position there. But you've come this far. If you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound,
Well, here's a question for you. In terms of their ability to remake what's there now. Tell me an NBA team that wants Russell Westbrook for what Russell Westbrook can do on the floor.
Well, there isn't one, and that's the thing is that
there you go. His value would be as an expiring contract.
Right.
So you wouldn't want
and attaching those two picks. That's why you
wouldn't want that expiring contract until later. You don't want to pay the whole thing anyway, because $47 million is going to, if you're any team of any substance, it's going to push you toward luxury tax, which costs you another 12 to 13 or 14 million in what you don't get in terms of the payout from the tax teams.
Yeah, it's going to be a real challenge moving Russell Westbrook's contract. You're probably going to have to take something back, and you're going to have to lose both of those picks. When I say take something back, I mean you might get a player who's useful. You'll probably get another player who's not, who's just overpaid, and you're going to be saddled with that. But at least if you can get, you get out of the Russell Westbrook thing. Obviously, everybody was miserable with that. So you get out of that, and then you can get at least one player who's useful, and then you just have a contract that you're sitting on. In the meantime, I think that's the best they can hope for.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm sure I'll read about this probably pretty soon. But the big fear and the big discussions that were happening in the owners' meetings in the 80s were about the money and the big contracts being signed. I think if you recall, it was Larry Johnson got like one of the first huge guaranteed money contracts.
Yeah, and
the fear wasn't the money that was being spent, on whether a guy, an all-star was worth what you could pay him. The fear was with the longer guaranteed contracts is, well, what happens if by year 3 or 4 of the contract, he's making this huge money and he's able to play, but he's just not able to play at a level that you're giving him this kind of money for. And that was the fear. And in a case of like a Russell Westbrook, that fear, it comes to fruition.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of guys we can mention, that over the course of the last several years that have reached that point where it's like they're being paid for somebody they used to be.
Right.
And they're sitting on your cap, they're sitting on your tax, and it's hard.
Yeah, and 20 years ago, they had the max number of years you could have was 7, and that was something that even that was pretty long. You had guys. I remember Jermaine O'Neill was one that stands out in my mind. He signed one of those 7-year deals, and like you say, by the 3rd or 4th year, it was like, what are we going to do with this?
That was
and David Stern made it a real issue to lower that to where now it's down to 5.
Yeah, look, it's the problem comes in where, first of all, I don't think you can ever prevent teams from doing the self-damage. That's going to happen, particularly when you get into a situation where if you're bidding competitively against someone else, then it's like, it becomes a thing where these guys have to have what they want and they overspend for it. But they don't just overspend for that one player. What they do is they set the market. And that's where the real danger comes in.
Yeah. One more thing with the Lakers, Steve, and that is Doc Rivers. He came up as a possibility. Of course, he's still employed by Philadelphia for the time being, and we'll see how long that lasts. Obviously, if they have a good playoff run, I don't think his job is necessarily done there, even though he's not the guy that Daryl Morey brought in. But with Doc Rivers Could you see him with the Lakers?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But look, I think when this year's over, you're going to be seeing players and coaches perhaps entering the transfer portal. I think they're going to take a page from college basketball. But, were a coach to be under contract for a team, or just an NBA person be under contract and be performing their job well to the point where the team that they were on or coaching or playing for wanted to keep them. But that player or coach wanted out. I think we've got quite a few examples of people who were under contract that got their way out of town anyway.
Yeah, and Doc has been pretty good at that.
Are let's see, James Harden and James Harden.
Yeah, but Doc's done that too. He did that with the Celtics going to the Clippers and got himself out of the Clippers sort of right in time with that job. He's been pretty ahead of the curve on it's time to move on and recognizing that. And if Philadelphia doesn't play well in the playoffs, maybe he'll he's only 60 years old. He wants to keep coaching, so he could certainly. I think where he is though. Now 14 years removed from the championship that he won, he's not going to be able to call his own shot the way he did in going to Philadelphia and going to the Clippers. So I think that's going to be something where, if the Lakers job is available and he's available, it might not be his ideal situation, but I don't know that I don't know that he's still in a position if Philadelphia underperforms in the playoffs. I don't know that he's still in a position to call his own shot there.
See, I'm not sure he's one calling his shot in Philadelphia.
Right.
Daryl Morey is the person that runs things. And I think I don't look at Doc's future in Philadelphia as a question of how the Sixers perform on the floor. I look at it more as how the Doc-Daryl Morey relationship works. If that is fine, then I think everything will be fine. But then again, Doc has his measure of wanderlust. When he went from the Lakers, from the Celtics to the Clippers, there was he was going to get a sweet deal, and they were going to give him the moon, the sun, and 2 Pacific Coast beaches to be named later. But his relationship with the Celtics and with Danny Ainge was fine. But Doc had looked at leaving prior to that.
Yeah,
he was out of town. He was telling friends, "Hey, I'll be seeing you soon," And then the Celtics made a run, and he stayed. So who knows? And I guess the point is to answer your original question and to kind of set ourselves for what could happen. The answer is, I guess, just that these things are, I think, very fluid, and a bad week here or there, or a perceived slight in a relationship could change how things proceed. Doc's in a good situation, but he's also in a situation where he's expected to win. That team is expected to win. And if they don't win a championship, the 76ers would be looked at as you didn't achieve the goal number 1. And goal number 2 is refer to goal number 1.
Right. And that's when the fluid situation could rear its head. Let me change gears a little here, Steve. And again, I'm Sean Deveney with Heavy.com Sports, and this is Steve Bulpett, our NBA insider. Somebody had asked me about this, and I thought it was a good question. Talking to people around the league, it seems like there's generally positive reviews. But look back on the first year here of Brad Stevens running the Celtics, making that transition. I think there were at least some a year ago, or I guess it was 10 months ago, who said, well, they just didn't know what to do with Brad. They didn't want to keep paying him, so they bumped him to the front office. Looking back at this, he has been as active as any general manager in the league. And to me, and when you ask around, I think that's the general consensus is he's done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, the off-season moves, the pickups, I'm not sure they fit necessarily, but they were, certainly worth the shot. The main guy they got was, the trade, getting off of Kemba Walker's contract. I don't think they expected Al Horford to be as good as he's been. And by the way, people are talking about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and they're talking about Rob Williams' ascension and Marcus Smart potentially being Defensive Player of the Year. And these are all hugely valid stories. But kind of lost in the shuffle here is the year that Al Horford's having. And there's analytics that back it up to show how really good he's been. But just his presence and what it's meant and how he's been able to solidify things and give you a consistency there that has allowed other people to do their jobs better. I think it's huge. So there was that move that I think worked out better than the Celtics thought it could even. But then bringing in Dennis Schroeder, I think they thought that was the bigger move than Josh Richardson, but Richardson ended up being the better player for them. But they got off stuff. I think the thing I liked about Brad at the trade deadline was, these were the guys he brought in, but not working, fine, I'm out of it. He didn't hold on to them and say, this is a referendum on my job as director of basketball operations. So, yeah. And then the other big move, again, another guy that's probably getting a little lost for recognition is Derek White. I wrote at the time that, look, that you're giving away an awful lot. When you're giving away a draft pick, a first-round draft pick, in addition to the trade stuff, to the players, that's an awful lot to give up for Derek White. But if he's the guy that you think if he's your guy, if he's the guy that you think really fits the bill here, then yeah, you should overspend for them because, in a certain sense, even back then the Celtics were looking at still a mid-first round pick. It's still a pig in a poke. There's still the opportunity, that it's certainly no sure thing. Even, guys in the high lottery are no sure thing. Certainly guys a little bit further down are less certain.
Yeah, Richardson has played well in San Antonio, so I think you have to say that, and that's going to be to me that's going to be the trade that's really going to size up this year for Brad, because you need Derek White to really perform and to show that he's their guy more than Josh Richardson was, because Richardson, like I say, he's played well. You give up the first rounder, you give up Langford, and Langford, hasn't played for San. He played 2 games, and there is also a 2028 pick swap, which I think is one of those things that people kind of said, well, why'd you do that? That one seemed to be a bridge too far for me, but White's 27, Richardson's 28. So you don't gain a whole lot with age there. It is like you say, it's just about the fit, and they obviously believe in it. One thing I'll say about White is, first 16 games with the Celtics, he averaged 9.5 points, shot 37%, 22% from the 3-point line. His last 8 games, he's averaging 13.4 points, 46% from the field, 45% from the 3-point line. Those are the kind of numbers that, if he can shoot like that, then, this will be a trade that'll make a lot more sense for the Celtics.
Even when he was shooting poorly, he wasn't taking bad shots. And, there wasn't like any scream of get this guy off the floor, because he was fitting in. He was doing everything else really well. He's, on a team that really needed it, that was in a deficit situation with guys who would move the ball. He's one of those, it's out of his hands in a half a second kind of guys. and they needed that desperately. And defensively, he has fit in not only when he comes in for Marcus Smart, but with Marcus Smart. That's a good defense to extend and just kind of jog you out of what you're trying to run and make it easier for guys on the back line to come in and clean up. Getting the right guys for what you want to do is huge. We spent the first part of this conversation talking about the Lakers, who had brought in good players, older players, but still good players who didn't fit. Now we're talking about the Celtics, and Derek White doesn't have the resume of some of those guys. It doesn't have the resume of Russell Westbrook or those guys, but he fits and he complements the other guys and what you're trying to do. And when Jason Tatum drives and collects 2 or 3 defenders, having a Derek White to come in and hit a floater, get to the basket, all these things, that's invaluable. That's the Celtics earlier in the year, even when they were playing well, were prone to give. You made a great run. They were prone to giving it up in 2 minutes because they would go into these lulls. Now they keep the hammer down a lot better, and it's because of guys like Derek White. It's again not a world beater. But the other part about too that I think you didn't have to worry so much about Derek White's outside shooting is that you were finally giving opportunities to a Peyton Pritchard, who's been like lights out. He showed you that some last year. He definitely showed it to you over the summer, and then you buried him. And another guy that's played well, has been a different guy over his last 3 appearances, is Aaron Nesmith. He's coming into the game now firing it up, and a couple of those have been in mop-up situations. One was he had to play significantly at
Toronto,
Toronto because of the guys injured and whatnot. But you've got to give those guys opportunity. So what the Celtics had for years was a bunch of first-round draft picks that never really got their shot or rarely got their shot. So who knows what Romeo Langford could have been. Who knows what he will be. But he certainly didn't, there were injuries in the way as well, but he certainly didn't get that commitment here. And you're still in danger, I think, with Aaron Nesmith, of him not getting that opportunity and commitment. And you see the opposite of that. You see how it works in the opposite, where a team like Miami, they put Duncan Robinson on the floor and say, shoot the damn ball.
Yeah.
They put Tyler Hero on the floor and say, shoot the damn ball.
Yeah. And another thing I think you can credit Brad with is Ime Udoka. Obviously not the smoothest start to the season, but I think over time we've seen that the way he addresses this team and the way he's not afraid to call people out publicly if need be. He's done that. And certainly the defense, the defense, I think that was one of their issues early on, was just getting used to the system and sticking with it, where they would have good runs with it and then they would give that up. But Ime has certainly done if you're looking to make a checklist on Brad Stevens, I think he'd have to be in the positive check mark.
Yeah, there are some scheme things with the defense they use now, but really it was it's a matter of wanna. Last year's team had, maybe you don't have what Rob Williams is now, and you didn't have Al Horford there, but it's guys, trusting each other, putting in the effort. They were not aggressive defensively, not nearly enough last year, and not nearly enough consistently early this season. I think there are a lot of reasons why it got turned around. And I think, and I'm going to be getting into some of those real soon, but I think it's a lot more than just players, the identity of players, and what they're being told, and all those things. Because the way that they're playing now is offensively, certainly, is precisely what Brad Stevens was begging for.
Yeah,
right. In previous years, like, telling him to get up and down the floor, like, run. Play with pace, and they just weren't. And I put that. If you're being told what to do, and it works not only for the team but for you, and you're still not doing it, you need someone to give you a rah-rah speech.
Right.
This is on you.
Yeah. And I think one more thing on Brad that will have to sort of hold off to see how this plays out, and that is he's left himself with a raft full of traded player exceptions heading into the offseason. With the way they've played and the fact that they've got a chance to be the number one seed in the Eastern Conference here, I wonder if Wick and the ownership group might give the green light to go a little bit deep into the luxury tax with some of those TPEs. Because there's some justification for doing it. If they can make a good playoff run, and you can take back a player into the Fournier one is $17 million. If you can justify that to the boss and say this is worth it because of this, that'll be the last leg of sort of how you judge this first year of Brad Stevens, is what he does with the exceptions he's created.
Yeah, the Celtics became like I think because of all, even back with Ainge, the number of trade exceptions they had, I think they were up for to get on an episode of Hoarders.
Yeah.
But I do think that they'll spend. The thing isn't that this team is afraid to spend into the luxury tax. They were trying to avoid the repeater tax.
Yeah.
If you're over, was it 3 out of 4 years, then you're up for some real onerous penalties.
And it limits some of the player movement that you can do as well.
Yeah.
Some of the people you can bring in. And
once they get clear, once they skate clear of that, then I know. Look, this team makes a bunch of money. The Garden, they have no problem selling tickets, and it's a huge benefit to owning this team, because even if this team is bad, the people are still going to show up. You're not going to ever see a half-empty Garden, and so whereas franchises in other cities have to worry about if we trade this name player, will people show up? I mean, this is Boston. People will go to the games. The Red Sox, got rid of Mookie Betts, and Fenway Park did not become a ghost town. Right.
And the regional broadcasting money, that's the other big thing, and that's always going to be there too, much like with the Red Sox. So they've got that going as well.
That's something we should probably talk about in the future, but just about how, with TV numbers, the viewership, et cetera, allegedly going down, how the rights fees keep going up. There's an interesting aspect to that I think we probably should talk about at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one last thing I did want to cover with you, Steve, before we get ready for the last couple of games of the NBA season here is the Warriors. They've kind of they've won their last two, but they've come limping down the stretch here, no question. Injuries to Draymond Green, injury to now to Steph Curry. Obviously, if they can get all that worked out before the playoffs, then this chatter might be moot. But there's been some talk, some suggestion that certainly the veteran players, Steph and Draymond Green, were very, very much open to them making some moves with their young guys if it could have helped them in the short term. And ownership has been pretty staunch against doing that. And obviously we still have Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and James Wiseman on the roster, even if Wiseman's not playing. But is there some reason to regret not having made a move with some of those guys at this point? Does this justify what Draymond and Steph were saying, that hey, we got to focus on winning now. We got to make ourselves as deep as possible.
Yeah, I'm still not sure what was available.
Yeah,
was it something? Excuse me. Because when you trade young players, guys that have in some of their cases really shown that they can perform, then are you giving away your depth for the next 4 or 5 or 6 years for something that'll help you right now? And is what was available enough to push them over the top, to guarantee that they'd be in the conversation? Look, I don't care who they brought in, that team's going nowhere if Steph and Draymond aren't healthy.
Right.
So, your eggs are in that basket right there. So anything else is, I think is superfluous.
Yeah, I don't think they were ever going to trade Kuminga. They liked him right from the get-go, and he's playing. I mean, he's playing useful minutes off that bench right away, even though he's still a pretty raw young player. But he's just got such overwhelming talent that they put him out there no matter what. Moody was always going to be sort of, you've got Clay, you've got Wiggins, you've got Damian Lee and Jordan Poole. So he was always going to have a hard time getting on the floor. And I don't think there was going to be a big market for him, like you say. It's not like he was going to bring you in a player who's going to push you over the top. So the big question was always going to be Wiseman, and what do they do with James Wiseman, who hasn't been healthy? That knee has got to be a real. He was supposed to be back in February, and here he is. Still not playing, so that's a real thing. I think what goes on with them, from what I've heard, is that the ownership really, they were very much involved in not taking LaMelo Ball and taking Wiseman as well. And sometimes you can get into, we've seen this plenty of times where, you get a little stubborn with something like that, where you say, I'm going to keep this guy till he shows that I'm right. And even if there was a chance to upgrade themselves with Wiseman, which I don't know that there was, because he hasn't been healthy, because he didn't play great last year, that I don't know that was ever really going to be there. But they were never going to trade him anyways, just because they want to at least prove, hey, we made the right pick by taking Wiseman over LaMelo Ball, which is going to be a pretty tough thing to prove, I'd say.
If you look at the Warriors roster on a piece of paper, name, age, height, etc., what would you say? If you look at their core, at their starters, the ones that what would you say is something that they should need? Size.
Yeah.
I mean, you're an undersized team. You won championships with Zaza Pachulia and Andrew Bogut. I mean, Bogut was there, right? Yeah. But if you'd say, okay, look, at a certain point, you're going to want a guy, a Rob Williams type, that can, and you've relied a lot on the skill and just desire of Draymond Green for a long time. And you've got to have someone coming up behind that's going to be able to, there's not going to be a Draymond Green in that group, but guys that can fill those roles defensively, etc. I can see them wanting to take as many shots as possible with people of size and see if one or two of them, bear fruit.
Yeah. One of the things that I remembered from preseason was that a lot of Steph and Draymond Green wanted them to keep Avery Bradley and get rid of Gary Payton Jr. because Bradley was more experienced and older and all that, and Bradley did not have a good year. Gary Payton's had a fantastic year, so those older veteran players, sometimes they don't know quite what's good for them.
Well, yeah, I mean. The older, older players, look at the Lakers again. Their guys, the older players wanted these other veterans. Yeah, I know this guy. He'll be good for us. But yeah, you've got to be to create a roster. You've got to be able to step back from it. I feel confident in saying that the moves that a Brad Stevens has made or hasn't made as the president of basketball operations they're different than what Brad Stevens, the coach, would have made if he had his finger on the trigger back when he was on the bench. Your coach is going to be more reactionary. Your coach is there. This game's over. Who do you play next? How do you play against who's next on the schedule?
Yeah,
but
right.
The GM, the president of basketball operations, has to have more of the 30,000-foot view and say, okay, yeah, I can see where this will do well here, but 3 miles down the road, there's a real problem if you keep going in this direction, and so having that kind of combination with player and coach, makes things peaceful. And even guys that know each other and like each other can have problems. I mean, when Larry Brown was coaching under Donnie Walsh in Indiana, two really good friends, but a huge part of Donnie Walsh's job was, keeping Larry Brown from wanting to trade the whole team every other night.
It's a good point. Well, thank you, Steve. Appreciate your time here and appreciate everybody for checking us out, and check out heavy.com for more of our NBA coverage. Thank you.